On this episode of Community Connect, Chandler and I interview friends who are a part of the Hispanic community in Utah. We wanted to find out how the predominantly white religious culture has affected minority groups in their community here in Utah.
All right, so I'm here with
Miguel.
How long have you lived in Utah?
Quite a while, about 7 or 8 years.
All right. What was it like living in Utah where the culture is heavily religious?
It's pretty stifling because the state pretty much, religion and state are intertwined, so it's difficult to do things that aren't related to their culture.
Gotcha. Has it been difficult to keep any family traditions in this culture?
Not really, because it's still possible to do family gatherings and kind of set your part of self from the rest of the culture here.
Okay. How has life in Utah been during the COVID-19 pandemic?
At first, it was pretty restrictive, but gradually things kind of opened up. It's probably for the best. They did a pretty good job.
All right. How good of a job do you think Utah has done with combating the COVID pandemic, and do you think they could have put more effort in or done a better job?
No, I don't think so. Given the population density of the state, I think the restrictions were pretty comparable. I think they did a pretty good job.
All right. How often do you experience discrimination in Utah as a racial minority, and do you experience any discrimination as a religious minority?
Not as a religious minority or as a racial minority. It may be different in other parts of the state, but in Salt Lake, it's still a pretty diverse area, so.
All right. If you were ready and able to move to a different state tomorrow, would you?
Yes, definitely.
All right. Do you feel heard or respected in your community?
Kind of. It depends where. Obviously, in parts that are more Hispanic, it's easier to become heard, but in a place where there's more white people, not as much.
All right. And last question. How do you think your community can become more involved in Utah with being able to speak about your traditions and culture?
Not exactly sure, considering our culture has been here almost as long as the white people. So we do a pretty good job of it, I'd say, already.
All right. Awesome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. So I am here with
Daniel Marquez.
All right. So Daniel, the first question I have for you today is how long have you lived in Utah?
Pretty much all my life, 24 years.
24 years. All right. Sounds good. What was it like growing up in Utah where the culture is heavily religious?
It was a little different. Every time I kind of wanted to hang out with friends, especially on a Sunday, it was just we couldn't do it. There were just a lot of customs that I had to get used to, especially around where I lived.
All right. And has it been difficult to keep any family traditions in this culture?
No, not really. My family's pretty strong on their like Mexican culture and all the family traditions, so no, that hasn't really changed.
All right. How good of a job do you think Utah has done combating the COVID pandemic? Do you feel like they could have put more effort in or done a better job?
Honestly, I mean, everywhere that I went, it seemed like they did everything they needed to do. I wasn't too heavily involved on like what the protocol was or what we could have done better. I guess that's where I could have done my homework. But honestly, I feel like every store that I went to or any places that I went to, they made sure that they followed the mandates and things like that.
All right, awesome. If you were ready and able to move to a different state tomorrow, would you?
If I had the financial capabilities, probably. I've thought about it a couple times just for many different reasons, but yeah, probably.
Okay. Almost done here. Have you ever faced discrimination due to your religion of choice?
Yes. So growing up when I was in elementary, having to explain to different Mormon kids that I went to school with what my Catholicism was and all those different things. There were times where people would tell me that I couldn't hang out with them because that's what their parents said. But if there were also really great Mormons that I met, and just so it was both ways. I think I faced really bad things in elementary and also really good things.
Okay, gotcha. Second to last question here. Do you feel heard and respected in your community?
Not necessarily. No, not necessarily.
Right. And last question, how do you think your community can become more involved in Utah with being able to speak about your traditions and culture?
I think just being able to understand that there is a gap, especially with first generation people coming over here. I think that's where it's just a little bit easier in the sense of information. A good example is just even college and signing up for scholarships and things like that. My parents had no idea even where to start. So those are just some things where I feel that there can be ways or resources to be able to help a lot more of the first generation, second generation, to get the resources that sometimes parents that have already lived 2 or 3 generations here already have for them.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
Is Yoslin Rivera. I'm from Provo, Utah.
Okay. How long have you lived in Utah?
I've lived in Utah for 21 years.
And what was it like growing up in Utah where the culture is more heavily religious?
So growing up in Provo, it's like a very, very different type of Mormonism than like coming here to Salt Lake. At the time, I didn't think it was like that bad until I had moved and like have explored a little more, but they do definitely push that culture onto you even if you aren't part of the church.
And with that, has it been difficult to keep your family traditions being in this more heavily religious culture?
I would say so, yes, just because where I grew up, it's predominantly white, and like with my school, it was very hard to find people with like different backgrounds, and so sometimes, like for me, it felt shameful to like be part of my culture because it wasn't the norm in like Provo.
Yeah. And how has life in Utah been during the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think for everyone, it's been kind of hard at the beginning, but now we're adjusting to it. Being that we live in Utah, like I feel like since we are mostly like an outdoorsy state, I feel like a lot of people were able to like go and hike and do things that they weren't able to do outdoors, since like that was being outdoors like wasn't a problem during COVID.
And because of that, do you think Utah, like the state, has done a good job combating the pandemic? Or do you think they could have done certain things better?
I think in some aspects they have, and then in others I definitely think that they should have done better. I think like the whole mask mandate, or like at the beginning of like the lockdown, that they should have taken that a little more serious. I feel like we wouldn't have lasted as long, or not as many people would have been infected with the virus if people would have just stayed home and only needed like to go for the essentials, but people were still going out, didn't really
as a racial minority
treat
or a religious
it like
minority,
it was
just
a big deal.
because you aren't Mormon yourself.
So yeah, going back to like what I said earlier, I am a Latina, so I'm Latina and I grew up Catholic. So again, in Utah, the LDS church is very pushed onto you. So I think for me, it was very hard especially trying to fighting like who I was as a person, just because I was trying so hard to fit in with like all my friends that were like that were white, and then like on top of that, they had this religion that they could all relate to, but that I couldn't. So it kind of like sucked, just because like I tried so hard to be a part of them when I just like I knew I wasn't. But I think once I came up to Salt Lake, it was a lot easier to find people that were like similar to me, race wise and religion wise. So I think it has its negatives, but it also has its positives.
Do you feel heard/respected in your community?
Yes, I feel like I do.
All right. And how do you think your community can become more involved in Utah with being able to speak about your traditions and culture?
I guess for me, I haven't reached out to too many places, so maybe they do have, they already have like a big community, so maybe just me reaching out, I don't know. I don't know because I haven't reached out. So I think they might be doing a good job, but because I haven't researched or looked up more, I wouldn't know. But within my school, like within the University of Utah, I know that there's a lot of clubs that I have like joined that have helped me be more involved with my culture.
All right, and for the last question, if you were ready and able to move to a different state tomorrow, would you?
100% I would. I love to like explore and like always be like open to new things. So I think just going somewhere that, again, I've lived here for 21 years, I would want to go and experience something else.
All right, so I'm here with.
Andrew Garcia.
All right, so first question, how long have you lived in Utah?
Pretty much my whole life, to be honest. I probably since I was like 6.
All right, and how many years is that?
See, 14.
14. All right.
Yeah, 14.
What was it like growing up in Utah where the culture is heavily religious?
Honestly, I didn't really have an issue towards it. I had a bunch of friends that were, Mormons, a bunch of friends that are Christians, Catholic. My family's Catholic, but overall, I'm open-minded. I like to know about every religion. Like, I went to a Christian camp and all that stuff. It was pretty cool.
Okay. Awesome. Has it been difficult to keep any family traditions in this culture?
No, not really. To be honest, there hasn't really been an issue. Like, everything's fine. Yeah.
Okay. How has life in Utah been during the COVID-19 pandemic?
It's been very different. My parents got sick. At the moment, I wasn't living with them, and they got sick, and my family got sick, so they couldn't work for a while and stuff. So, it wasn't as bad. Thank you. Like it. That it wasn't bad, that it could have been worse, but honestly, we haven't really had much trouble, just besides there's a couple times where, work has been low and just that,
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, how good of a job do you think Utah has done combating the COVID pandemic, and do you think they could have put more effort in or done a better job?
I feel like they could have put more effort into it, honestly, I feel like if they were really heavy on the lockdown that they did, it would have gone, by faster.
Exactly.
And it wouldn't affect it as much as it did if they were really serious about a lockdown.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, because the lockdown they did, pretty much no one didn't really care. People still did whatever they wanted, and that's because they weren't strict on it.
Exactly. Okay. How often do you experience discrimination in Utah as a racial minority, and have you ever experienced discrimination as a religious minority?
Honestly, there has been times we've been discriminated and stuff. Like, actually, for the first time it happened to me, I went to the store last time over there by like the east side, like South Jordan and all that stuff. And I went to a Walgreens, and I legit just went to go get, a couple snacks and stuff. And I went in there, and there was like a couple in front of me, and they were white and stuff. And the guy paid with the $100 bill, and she didn't check the guy, and when I paid with the a $20 bills, and she checked my money. Yeah. So it was like, what the? It was kind of weird, I just started laughing, to be honest.
Yeah.
I didn't say anything. I was just like, oh, have a good day. But I don't know. It didn't really hurt me. I just thought it was really funny because I was like, oh, shoot, it kind of happened, Yeah.
All right. If you were ready and able to move to a different state tomorrow, would you? Like, if you just had all the money ready to move to a different state, would you?
Low-key, I would. I would because, I've been here in Utah basically my whole life. And honestly, I don't see myself being here too long because, I don't know, it's just not a place where I haven't really done much, so I would live somewhere else where I could open up my opportunities.
Gotcha. All right. Do you feel heard and respected in your community?
Yeah, I do. Like I said, we haven't really had issues or anything like that. Which is good. But in my community, I think everyone's good to us, to the people that we're good to, and they're good to us. Just even strangers overall, Yeah. Yeah.
All right, awesome. Last question. How do you think your community can become more involved in Utah with being able to speak about your traditions and culture?
That's a great question, to be honest. I think I got to think about that one.
Okay.
Um, I feel like I said, I feel like our culture isn't really as disrespected and stuff.
Yeah.
But recently there has been a lot of racial things and stuff like that going around the world and everything. But I feel like for us, like, I don't know. I feel like we're respected.
Okay.
I guess I don't know. I don't know a good way to put it.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like we could do more festivals like the Day of the Dead and stuff like that, or like Cinco. People celebrate the Cinco de Mayo here, stuff and stuff like that. Like that's what makes us see that people share culture at times. So I don't know. I don't know if I worded that right.
No, yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
All right, so I'm here with.
Spencer Castillo.
All right, Spencer. First question: how long have you lived in Utah?
I've lived here my whole life.
And how long is that?
That is almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years. All right. What was it like growing up in Utah, where the culture is heavily religious?
Very difficult being my Mexican heritage. We have very different cultures.
All right. Has it been difficult to keep your family traditions in this culture?
In ways, because sometimes you get interrupted on Sundays.
All right. How has life been in Utah during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Pretty tough. Hard not seeing all your family together.
How good of a job do you think Utah has done combating the COVID pandemic? And do you think they could have put more effort in or done a better job?
I would agree they needed to put more effort in this. Big-ass pandemic.
All right. How often do you experience discrimination in Utah as a racial minority?
I have been discriminated maybe once or twice in my life.
Okay. Next, if you were ready and able to move to a different state tomorrow, would you? Just financially
Yes.
ready. Have you ever faced discrimination due to your religion of choice?
No.
All right. Do you feel heard or respected in your community?
I feel pretty respected by most people.
Okay. And last question, how do you think your community can become more involved in Utah with being able to speak about your traditions and culture?
Maybe open up some, I don't know, maybe some community centers where you could rent out.
After all the interviews, one thing that stuck out was the fact that everyone said if they had the financial means to move out of state, they would. Another interesting point that was observed was the fact that some interviewees still had experienced some form of discrimination, whether it was racial or religious. This goes to show that certain communities, not only in Utah but in the United States as a whole, still experience some form of discrimination. As a society, how can we become open-minded to other cultures and make other cultures feel more welcomed?